Manufacturing and industrial environments provide their own unique challenges for wireless communications. Harsh conditions, both indoors and out, create a daunting task for engineers to work through. This is where we come to discuss those challenges, share ideas, and help one another out. My name is Scott McNeil, and welcome to the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop. Welcome back, everybody. Another episode of the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop. This is episode 7. Industrial Wireless Gets the Axe. I am Scott McNeil. Welcome back. With me, the best color commentary money cannot buy, Jeremy Baker. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Scott.
Today, I wanted to get into some news and trends and event stuff. I want to, first of all, let me talk a little bit about a local wireless event we had here in North Carolina, WICO, the wireless community event that we had in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. It was on June 12th. And it was awesome. If you're not familiar with what WICO is, it's essentially smaller wireless-based conferences so that they're more localized and affordable because not everybody can afford to go to a week-long conference and pay thousands of dollars. You know, the registration fees are very low. There's lots of good content. They've already taken off very well in Europe, and we're pushing them forward here in the US. And our first formal full day WICO event in Chapel Hill, North Carolina was awesome. We had a lot of great presentations from participants and some of the vendor sponsors, and it was fantastic. You know, one of the big things that happened on this particular event is I was fortunate enough to get a 2-hour time slot, and I ran a hands-on industrial wireless lab. Participants got to physically wire up 24-volt power supplies and the industrial radios connected to them. And then they went through an entire configuration lab, and it was a lot of fun. And everybody seemed to have a really good time and learned a lot. But what's really the best part of this is the people that it brought in. So it was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We had a young lady from Washington, D.C. area. She works for Meraki. She was down there. Let's see. Then we had, like half of the staff of UNC Chapel Hill were there, you know, the Tar Heels. So like I don't even think there was anybody to work that day. And actually one of them, Dawn Douglas, she was one of the coordinators for this particular event. And so she kind of is heading up WICO, North Carolina, and she did a fantastic job with the venue and everything like that, which was at the North Carolina Botanical Gardens. So it was gorgeous. Adam Jennings came down from northern North Carolina. You know, he works for a big VAR, and he runs his own consulting business as well. He didn't know a ton about wireless, but you know, he wants to learn more, and he had a great time and learned quite a bit. He left with several CWNP books. CWNP was a sponsor. And Cody Duffy, I don't know if you know who Cody Duffy is, but he is an OT. He's a pure OT cybersecurity guy. No wireless background at all. He'd been listening to the show. He's out of Augusta, Georgia. And so he registered and he came up and he went through the whole lab, had some great conversations with him. He learned a lot that day too. And you know, and it was just such a great coming together of the community, and everyone was just awesome. So if you ever get the chance to participate in a WICO event, I do highly recommend it. I've got the link set up for it in the show notes. It was a really good time. Jeremy, you were involved in some of the preliminary WICO events, were you not?
I actually was able to conveniently schedule a site visit to coincide with one in Orlando, and it was a good time. And it sounds like yours was pretty fun, and it sounds like the power supply portion was electric.
Oh, really?
No, it sounds like a good time. And especially like somebody like Cody, it sounds like, you get people that have a lot of experience in kind of adjacent technologies. And that's where you get really good feedback because you've got somebody that's got a complete different perspective on things.
Oh, I agree, and kudos to him for wanting to kind of expand his horizons and viewpoints and coming in. It was nice having another OT person in the house.
Hmm.
But it was just a great experience, and he got to experience how warm the wireless community is when we come together. And I mean, everyone was, even the vendors were all really chill and relaxed, and a good time was had by all. There were a lot of giveaways, and there was some pretty good swag in there too. Ali
Yeah.
Muhammad, his company that he works for, is one of the sponsors, and we got backpacks and all kinds of good stuff.
I
So,
got, yeah, Imperium usually does pretty good with the swag.
and the t-shirts, the shirts are gorgeous. They're a high quality shirt with the Wyco logos and stuff.
Hmm.
I wear mine all the time. There were a couple extras left over, so I got one for my wife and one for my daughter. So now Wyco's showing up all over Wilmington, North Carolina.
Yeah. Well, they got a great logo, man. I think their branding is pretty spot on. Like it's
Yeah,
pretty
the
nice.
whole thing about the with the elephants and bringing the herd together, I think it's a really cool analogy.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely like works because I mean it is like a social business, right? Like you have people that you meet at these events and you might be able to shoot them a text when you run into a problem on site or something, or
Right.
just share knowledge generally. Like
Well,
there.
it takes the concept of the user group, which there are user groups all over the place, but there's not really that I'm aware of Wi-Fi user groups. You see them all over the place for there's a lot of VMware user groups, VMUG and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and user groups for other aspects in technology, but wireless is something you don't really see. So you kind
Yeah.
of equivocate that to remember that word, equivocate, when I'm making stuff up, calling it equivalent. Anyway, it's the equivalent of a wireless user group meeting, but it's
Hmm.
a lot more fun if you ask me. And then
Well, and you
just the
probably,
contacts you make out of it are
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, and you probably see people that just come out and there's like industries that you have no idea existed. That's like when I started here, I'm from the town that I work in. I'm like, oh, there's chemical plants here, and then there's like subsea cable manufacturers, and there's shipbuilding and all this stuff, and you just never really kind of notice it. So like being in these events, you're like, you end up meeting people, and you're like, oh, I didn't even know that that was like a thing, right?
Yeah, totally. Totally. Speaking of, didn't know that was a thing. So it looks like 802.11ax. Industrial wireless is getting the axe. Wi-Fi 6 is coming to industrial radios. I find that really fascinating because, Wi-Fi 6 has been ratified for over a year now. Is that correct? Roughly?
I believe so, yeah.
That's quite a long time, but that's really fast for coming into the industrial universe for a segment of technology that is usually way behind everybody else.
Hmm. And I think maybe, when it was, I guess when it was like in draft and they were producing, there were, it looks like devices produced since like 2019-ish, right? So I think there is a little bit of time for them to kind of develop that stuff and realize that it is going to be potentially usable.
So I know there are radios being produced that are AX, not necessarily AXE. So that being said, will the expanded spectrum and 6 gigahertz really find a home in the industrial universe? That's one thing. That's the first question I got.
Well, I think that there are a lot of considerations for the extended spectrum, and I think that some of the nitpicky details for how you could use that spectrum as far as um, like the client transmit parity is gonna, and then the no external antennas on the what is it, the low power radios. I think that's going to really kind of hurt us in environments because sometimes you you kind of got to juice the power to like get through the noise floor that's in a manufacturing environment.
The other, well, talking about the noise floor, I have yet to do spec and in 6 gigahertz. So I don't even know what that kind of noise floor is looking like from an
Hmm.
EMI RFI point of view. So that's something I've got to get some adapters for so that I can start getting some 6E spectrum grabs.
Yeah, and I think and it's probably gonna be close to, kind of more close to like a greenfield situation now because all these tri-band radios are starting to come out, and the refresh cycle is, sometimes 10 years or more in some of these plants. So
Right.
a lot of them are still AX installs from 10 years ago.
Well, I know just from if it's going to follow kind of how things have been going when I do spec and I always see a lot of interference in 2.4 from multiple different aspects of machinery, just in general. Matter of fact, some of the heaviest interference I've ever seen generated by machinery has been 2.4, 2. Well, actually 2.3, 2.4, and 2.5. Remember the old WiMAX spectrum? WiMAX really isn't a thing anymore, but I really didn't see a ton of EMI RFI and 5 GHz just in general. And what I did was usually evolved around like automated lighting systems, so that was even kind of touch and go at that point. So it's going to be interesting to see when I finally get some adapters and go on to a site and see if any of this stuff is producing any sort of EMI RFI in 6 GHz. If not, that really takes Greenfield to a whole new level. But the other side of that is when you're looking at 6 GHz, the higher the frequency, the less of a penetrative value you have, right? And the more reflectivity that you get out of that. So how
Yeah.
useful is that going to be when you get deep in the guts of dirty manufacturing, like chemical, oil, gas, and pulp and paper, versus larger outdoor deployments? Because I can
Hmm.
I can totally see it having an application in larger open space outdoor deployments. But once you get down into the guts of dirty manufacturing, I'm not sure 6 GHz is really going to make much, if any, impact.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that definitely you're right on there because the drop off is right. Two fours goes through practically anything, no problem. Five starts attenuating, and then you get even higher, and then it just falls off a cliff real fast. So I think that you get a pack of finished goods that have any moisture content in them or anything like that. I mean, even a roll of paper, and you're going to be, you may as well call it like a concrete wall almost.
Right. Well, especially in roll handling and pulp and paper, be it brown stock, be it white stock, be it whatever. I mean, it
Mhm.
just eats it. It eats it. But then also when you look in like metallurgy and ore processing, all of those heavy reflective areas, what's that going to do? As we all know, a little bit of reflection's good. It helps with connectivity. However, a lot of reflection is bad, and then you start getting the multipath fading, and it goes to pot really, really quick.
Yeah, and then you got stuff like a crane with a ladle full of metal, or you got an AGV that's got a however many ton slab sitting on top of just like a flat surface
Or
that's
even
rolling
just a
around.
bucket of ore that it's carting around.
Hmm. I remember some of your pictures of just those like big batches of ore sitting in stacks.
Oh yeah, just the zinc
Yeah.
processing. Yeah, just it's insane. And then when you look at just a standard passive survey and you actually can see the reflectivity in that passive survey as these weird, crazy spots in different rows and whatnot,
Hmm.
because it's either getting, bombarded by a ton of garbage traffic that it cannot measure, or it's essentially reflecting so much it's leaving holes.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's like that when you're trying to like spray out your trash can with the hose, and then it all like splatters up on you because it hits the perfect spot.
Right. And then you're all mad because now you got a wet face and you didn't want to get wet to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's all the gunk you don't want. Well, I
So
think I
while
think I think too, kind of stepping back on this a little bit in these environments, right? What is I'm not crazy about, and this might be getting ahead, but I'm not crazy about the standard power options or like what we're going to be able to do with that, where we can actually use external antennas and enclosures. The low power stuff, I think, is probably going to be close to useless in a lot of these environments because you can't weatherize. So like you can't have ingress protect, like you can't have an external ingress protection that's gonna keep toxic fumes or like high humidity or any of that stuff.
I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor for this episode, Global Process Automation. GPA is an engineering and technology firm based in North Carolina, serving clients in industrial processing and manufacturing, focusing on solutions for industrial automation, operational technology infrastructure, industrial control systems, cybersecurity, manufacturing intelligence, and analytics. For over 25 years, their clients have entrusted them with their processes to maximize their company's efficiency and obtain an optimal ROI based upon their assets while protecting their operational technology resources. GPA's mission is to automate, optimize, and secure manufacturing floors everywhere while maintaining their core values to have integrity, to continuously improve, embody their community, remain customer focused, and implement great teamwork. Thanks, and back to our show. It's fascinating to see what direction this is going to end up taking and the changes that'll have to be made. And I'm wondering what kind of amendments will end up coming.
Yeah. And I'm happy to be proven wrong. And if anybody has any suggestions to how to
Absolutely.
work that in,
By all means,
that's where I'm like,
if there's
there's
if
probably a
anyone
creative
out
way
there
to
has
get it.
additional insight, please, contact us. Let us know. I want to see it, feel it, touch it, taste it.
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah, because
skeptic
there's
by
somebody,
nature, so
yeah,
I want I want that documentation. I want that proof.
yeah, and there's got to be some sort of, there's a niche for it somewhere. Like there's a way to apply it. So it's just what's going to actually accept that and thrive.
And so while actual 6E spectrum use is kind of up in the air, I really think the enhanced stability of the AX protocol and the enforcement of WPA3 and the big thing about that is the if you ask me, other than the encryption algorithms on it, but is the enforcement of protected management frames. I think that's a huge deal because that alone eliminates so many attack vectors on your wireless traffic. That alone is a huge bonus because I mean, when you look at WPA2, you can enable that, but not all WPA2 older devices are capable of that. So, but if you get a device that is WPA3 compatible off the bat, then you don't have to worry about that. You're
Yeah.
golden. And in some, more sensitive industrial and manufacturing, I can totally see that being as a huge benefit and bonus, especially when you're looking at plants that make specialized proprietary stuff. Oh, I don't know, like Kevlar. The
Yeah.
formulas for Kevlar and the ingredients for Kevlar and the process for making Kevlar are all heavily guarded, industrial secrets.
Hmm.
But wireless is becoming so prevalent in much of the manufacturing process. You want to make sure that that's not your weak spot for any sort of espionage on any kind of level. And I know it sounds kind of 007-ish, but I don't think people realize just how much that happens. And
Yeah.
an important example of that is the downfall of Nortel. Nortel is a technical company and they had their hands in networking and wireless and a bunch of different things and telecommunications. It was industrial espionage that brought the downfall of Nortel out of their corporate headquarters up in Canada. So it's a real thing. It does happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Stuxnet, right? Like you can go to like a real major like hiding stuff in the program. I mean, it's not, you need these, like a RS Logics like Studio 5000 or like TIA Portal or any of that kind of stuff. Like you can get access to those tools. Like you can get we've had like some of our people kind of do testing. Like there's possibility of like doing Mac spoofing, man in the middle attacks, like all that kind of stuff. And like if you can get it, if you can get the password to the Wi-Fi because it's on a post-it note at
Exactly.
the at the HMI, then it's like it is possible because I think some of the industrial equipment has not really had to deal with, an unexpected device pretending to be something else.
Well, on top of that, whether spoofing to get information or just a simple DOS a PLC, and let's use for those who aren't familiar in the wireless universe, a PLC is a programmable logic controller. It is a device that takes a logical configuration and then has real world impact. A lot of times, and we'll use like a Rockwell PLC as an example. It has specific cards in it to add to different functionalities. And one of those cards is called an ENT2 card. It is an Ethernet connection, right? Well, these cards are built for industrial protocols and industrial communication with a little bit of IP3, or IP v4 thrown on top so that it can sit there and communicate with standard Ethernet packets, right? These are not designed to take the abuse that a standard switch port can take. Okay, it doesn't have the resources and it doesn't have the protocol structure behind it to be able to put up with that. We have tested in the lab with a simple high string of ping sweeps of being able to disable that ENT2 card and disrupt the process. So even as something as simple as knowing the address of a PLC and being able to compromise through that wireless network and sit there and just do active scans at a high rate, be it ping scans or port scans, you can easily disable some of these very sensitive controls devices because they're looking for low data rate sensor throughput, or sensor input rather. They're not looking for this mass high volume of stuff that they have to process before they can drop it because they have to process that data to see whether it's theirs or not. This is why multicast traffic can be such a beast in a controls environment, because it's something extra you have to process before you can drop it. And so the enhanced security measures to bring it back of WPA3 really reduce that vector of vulnerability dramatically when you have active wireless within your industrial environment.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think too, in the vein of this, right, where we're talking about kind of the protocol and like you just said, the like talking about multicast and like just even in like a non-cybersecurity context, like the barrage of unnecessary traffic that's there. I think that's kind of one of the questions you're asking, right? It's like, what do we see in the AX protocol that could potentially help us out, right? In that OFDMA, which is the orthogonal frequency division multiple access, where it's you get the sub carriers of the channel for like individual clients. And then is it also the BSS coloring portion where it's like it tells you to kind of like you get some like packet filtering out of that too, where it's like the radio just doesn't even process stuff that's not
I have
relevant.
never used BSS coloring. Have you?
I have not, but I
I've seen
think
it
that
as
some of
options, but I also see it in I won't name the manufacturer, but when you mouse over it, it says BSS coloring not recommended for deployment or whatever.
yeah,
I
I think
haven't
some of that
warned against it.
I think some of that stuff has probably an opportunity because you get in. I imagine like in pulp and paper, maybe not at every level of the process, but some things where it's like you need to have a bunch of sensors to make sure you're not putting out toxic chemicals or like that stuff stays in alignment. And then you're, required by regulation to report your levels of gas
Yeah.
expulsion and stuff. I think with a bunch of those sensors, like I think that AX might help make that stuff kind of more real time than I mean, it's already sufficiently working, but I think that you can get more efficiency out of that.
I I'm inclined to agree with that.
We'll have to see that, right? Can we get, will
Right.
the radios work in the environment? But I mean, if you're not in the extended range, right, then we still have the same, just in the in our vanilla like 5 gigahertz world. I think it's going to be, we could still kind of do whatever, right? So, as long as we're not in the extended range, I think there's going to be a lot of benefit just from the protocol upgrade.
I think so, and I think that's more of a stability enhancement. in general across the air. It's got a little bit better, as a protocol, it has a little bit better interference mitigation, just kind of built in for noise floor and different things like that. I think it's going to add, I think it's a positive contribution to the industrial wireless world, whereas I don't necessarily think 6 gigahertz is going to be a huge positive impact. I think it's just going to be meh, it's there.
Yeah, we're gonna. My plan is to try to bully the IT people into using that for laptop connections throughout the plant floor, and give us 5 gig for automation.
How is this going to affect some of the weirder stuff that we encounter, and specifically radial coax? What's the
Well,
well will will
that's a good.
does
That's
radial
actually
coax give a crap about the protocol itself? Well, I mean, I know it's just
no. It's a. I mean,
copper, but
well, hold on.
or
As
will that be a frequency thing?
So as part of this, right? That's a good. I was about to ask you like what your thoughts were on like how is this going to work with systems in tandem because we're going to have you can have 802.11a systems out there still, all these legacy clients and stuff. Like what happens when we're sharing the same frequency? And that's something I need a little bit deeper to dig deeper on. But you know, are we even if they're not associated with the SSID, if it picks up on that traffic, like how much interference is that? Because you're going to have an arcoax. So then to get directly to the arcoax thing, right? Depending on the protocol. So if it's like Siemens, it's probably going to be using something like IPCF, which is like the point coordination function, deterministic. You get a time slice, sync with the PLC. But it's at the end of the day, the arcoax is essentially just an antenna, right? It's an outer conductor, it's an inner conductor, dielectric sleeve, and then you've got typically you have in connectors on the end of it, right? So it's like a long sort of directional antenna in the near field, but also it travels further than you think some of the antennas are like, you have to have it within 2 inches of the coax for it to work efficiently. And that's like I think that's just the tuning of the client antenna. But, this stuff kind of sitting around like it doesn't cast far enough for like radios to necessarily detect it far off, but we see where they'll interfere with it pretty regularly. But I think the protocol is going to be fine, but it's just how does AX handle being pretty much like CISO only, because that's the thing where you're using ARCOX is it's typically you've only got a single input, single output.
I didn't even think about the CISO implications of that. I don't have a whole lot of experience with our
Mhm.
coax, so
I've been wondering like can you put two chunks of could you run two, which nobody'd want to do this, but could you run two segments of it so you've got essentially two antenna ports. You'd probably have to space them
you would have to
kind of.
space them. Otherwise, I would one would think it would step all over each other if they were too close.
Mhm.
And
But allegedly you can like dual feed them. So like frequency A from one end, frequency B from the other end, and they don't interfere with each other.
I like
I
how you
think,
said allegedly.
well, that's at the manual. Some of the manuals say that you can do it. I mean, I'm sure there's probably like some level of like fixed attenuator you have to put on the ends to make sure you protect the transmit ports on the radio side. But I, th I don't know. That's a good question, and I think I need to take a piece of our coax from our lab and put it on a radio.
Well, I think that's what it's gonna take, right? To figure out predictable results with it is labbing it up and seeing, because the last thing you want is your customer inadvertently paying for a proof of concept deployment, right?
Yeah, they don't typically like when you give them a science project.
No, no, they don't. Well, I'm paying for what? Yeah, well, hey, that's kind of how it goes.
Well,
Um,
hypothetically, we could cut a hole in this trash can and put the radio in there.
well, but to your point, what we were talking earlier, the other yet another dynamic to all this is the end customer wanting bigger, better, faster, more, right? Some of them are know just enough to be dangerous, and they are seeing the advertisement for it. They are seeing what the sales guys are saying. it's Wi-Fi 6 can now give you like uber gigawatts of throughput. And
Mhm.
meanwhile, you're kicking back, well, okay, uber gigawatts. I only need about a meg's worth of throughput, but sure, why not? I'll take uber
Yeah,
gigawatts.
and if we're talking about Uber gigawatts, you really only need like 1.21.
Well, yeah, and you have to hit 88 miles an hour. So
I don't think some of the younger engineers will get that,
it's all good. Well, then they need to go back and watch the good
but
movie.
yeah, yeah, dude, that's the big problem that I think that you would probably agree, like that's a big problem that we run into on site as you come into a system that's having problems and it's all the sales knobs are turned on still. And so a lot of times, like a system might be tuned down to like, here, this is right, but then a vendor comes on site and they throw up their little like net gear or whatever it is. And that person's not sitting there thinking, oh, what's the wireless environment in this manufacturing? They're just like, hey, I need to talk to this thing over wireless. Click, 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 SID, power on, I'm done. And then now you got like an 80 megahertz channel, just like eating up everything that you have, or 160, or now it's going to be 320, right?
Well, I think it just kind of goes back to the concept that OT guys, IT guys, anybody in wireless and anybody in technology in general has to deal with, and that's the overhype of a product or a technology
Mhm.
by the marketing and sales people of getting this new uber gigawatt device, and then realizing I'm not going to get uber gigawatts out of it. I don't need uber gigawatts. I need dramatically less. So I don't think I want to pay the premium price for that uber gigawatt.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times we're like, hey man, you got 20 vehicles that are going to be running around in the shop floor and they all need like 500K per second of traffic. It's like, what are we doing here?
All these guys need a 2-lane road, so we are going to build a 12-lane superhighway
Hmm.
for your 3 buses and 2 Chevy Novas that are going to be
Yeah.
running around.
Yeah. Hey, that's a nice little bitty creek that you got there. Let's build the Hoover Dam, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, not that I could never be accused of trying to over engineer or anything either though. So
I don't know what you're talking about. When you look back, there's several manufacturers that do already have 802.11ax devices on the market. Phoenix Contact has 2 models. They have an internal and an external antenna model industrial radios. Their WLAN 1020 and 1120 series. I actually just got a pair of those in my lab, and I'm super excited to test it out just to see what it can do. Take it for a test drive. Talking with their product guy, he's pretty excited about it. Just if nothing else, from a stability enhancement. Although it is kind of fun in your lab to be running, so multiple hundreds of meg through an industrial radio that you didn't think was capable of doing that.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I bet that's fun.
uh, Prosoft. I had a nice conversation with one of my contacts at Prosoft. They just released a Wi-Fi 6 wireless bridge. Um, it's nothing too crazy. It's an in-cabinet install, DIN-rail mountable wireless bridge. So it's specifically meant for point to point. Obviously, they are looking to do a full Wi-Fi 6 AP client release by quarter 4. Now, I don't. Now that is not 6E. That's just AX. But they are looking at adding 6E to their product line early 2025. So I thought that was really cool that he was able to give me those insights. I checked their website, Prosoft Technologies, and I did not see the thing on the website. I may not have just been looking at the right place because I usually go right for their other series. Because like Phoenix, they skipped Wi-Fi 5 altogether. When you look at AC was 5 gigahertz only. It still kept 2.4 and N. So
Hmm.
um, what was the point there when the vast majority of what you're going to be doing is 60%, 70% your 802.11 deployments are in 2.4 in the industrial universe, right? There's
Hmm.
not your percentage of 5 gigahertz deployments in the industrial universe is dramatically smaller than that of 2.4.
Yeah,
Um,
the only time we really see AX like out in the shop is when it's, there's like a, Cisco or Aruba Extreme
right.
Ruckus, any of those guys as the infrastructure. So um it's yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's like we don't really like all the, even like Siemens is like had put out one AC radio, but it's pretty much everything we use is like 802.11n.
Well, speaking of your beloved Siemens, just 'cause I know you do a lot of work with Siemens, so
Dude,
um,
they're listen, it's the I've been able to handle a lot of interesting situations with those blue little pieces of wonder.
they have an AP and a client radio currently in production out for sale that are sick that are AX. Now I
Yeah.
don't think I didn't have time to really fully read through their data sheets, but I don't think they're 6E, but they are full AX radios.
Yeah,
Um,
there's six, they're not 6E, and my understanding is that they just finished the FCC certification, so now there's you're able to use them in the Uni 2 as well. So that was like a little bit of a limitation from the hardware coming out, but that's available now.
Well, Paul Nuss from Siemens sent me some information um, and some links that I got to, you know, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, yep, great guy.
Um, so that I want to go through and read a little more in depth because just the information in general is good to have and
Mhm.
whatnot.
Well, and
Uh,
those the seven, so like the 763 that you mentioned is kind of their control cabinet model, which really is
right.
like
That's what
the
those
one
are.
that,
They're both control
yeah,
cabinets.
that's what I would go for form factor wise, unless you need the other one. They've got another one that's kind of a little bit, it's got a little bit higher IP. It's got N connectors, it's got M12s on it, and it's fine too. But like you could do most of the stuff with that. And the nice thing about that is now you got four switch ports on the front of them too.
So what's this other one we've got on our list here? I am not familiar with them. Uh,
So
how do you
that
pronounce
that
that?
that Onyx one,
Onyx. Oh, that's Onyx. Okay. You said Onyx earlier, and I think ONYX. So
yeah. What was that song of there? No, we probably shouldn't be singing the Onyx song.
oh, well, Slam done
Yeah,
cut it.
that's what it was. Let the boys be boys. Uh,
Exactly.
yeah, I think that too. No, so they're I think I think it's a newer like branch off of a company. I hope they don't. Um, I don't know enough about like the company history or the structure to say it, but I have one of their radios and I have been trying to get the decks cleared on some other projects to get it plugged up and tested. But it's my understanding is that it is 6E capable so far. So I think it can do both 5 and 6E. I just have not had a chance to test it yet.
What do their radios look like?
It's going to look kind of like probably like like the Phoenix Contact, like it's
Okay.
a
Small DIN rail mount module.
yeah, they're not like there's not like a lot of pizzazz to them, right? Like it's kind of like a no nonsense, like maybe it's not stamped metal, but it's like a stamped metal enclosure, and then it's assembled ports on one side. I mean, it's a clean, like efficient, you'd be able to put it in a control cabinet, and that's pretty sturdy. Handling it is pretty sturdy.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm interested to see what one of
And
those.
then they've got different kind of setups too. So it's like if you need RS-232 or something like that, like a serial interface or any of that, like they do a lot of that. And we've got several AGV customers that use them. So we haven't specifically like gone to a deployment use them yet, but have used them in other fields. So like they're out there, they're successful. So I'd say it's definitely worth checking out.
Now, I don't know if Hirschman has AX radios or not. I know their radios are a little funky. They're essentially a Wi-Fi bolt-on to or at least the ones I've played with are like a Wi-Fi integration into one of their switches.
Hmm.
And so the configuration on them is a little funky, um, at least as compared to what I'm used to working with. But I don't
Yeah.
know if they have anything released or not, and I honestly haven't had time to research it. So
Yeah, well, I mean that's where it is too, where it's kind of like some of these things, it's like you're are aware of it, but you don't touch it until you have to show up to the site and deal with it.
right.
And then you have to really like dig into it. And It's not a knock on any of the equipment, right? It's just like the natural orbit of things. It's like what kind of squeaky wheel gets the grease, if you will.
Yeah, totally. That's it. That's interesting on what the Axe is doing in the industrial wireless universe. So I started doing some reading the other day because I was kind of interested to see what what others were saying about, the trends and where industrial wireless is going, just in kind of in general, right? And I found there's not a lot out there. There's not a ton of people really talking about the trends of where industrial wireless is going. There's a ton of content out there for the wireless industry, which is just wireless in general, and viewpoints and where people think it's going. There's not a lot out there kind of taking a deep dive and where they see the world of wireless connectivity in the industrial universe. I did find an interesting report put out by Precision Reports. However, I did not have $3,500 to buy the full report. So I was able to get some pretty interesting information out of the preview for that report. And I thought I would kind of share this just in general because it's fascinating how the expansion of we tend to think of industrial wireless just here in the States or in Europe and really kind of fail to grasp, or at least from my point of view, fail to grasp the worldwide implications of wireless communications and industrial manufacturing. Because it's not just us, you know. So worldwide, the largest manufacturer of industrial wireless devices, and this is in descending order. Okay, this is an old school late night top 10, right? So the top manufacturer of industrial wireless devices is Emerson. Over 10% of what's out there is Emerson. So that's Delta V and several other people that they bought. And Delta V, they were on the squad that initially developed ISA 100. They had a heavy hand in that. So that kind of makes sense if you look at it from a historical point of view. Followed up by Honeywell and then Siemens. But Honeywell and Siemens together make another about 10% of that. Our follow-ups to that then are in fourth is ABB, then GE, and then Eaton. And now Eaton, who does Eaton own? That they've acquired some controls companies, but that Eaton to me has always been power and UPS. So it's interesting to see them in the manufacturing of industrial wireless devices. Then in sixth place is Cisco. So to the best of my knowledge, Cisco doesn't make industrial wireless sensors and things like that. I know they do have heavy duty radios built for 802.11 and for harsh conditions and mining and different things like that.
Mhm.
I didn't realize how prevalent they were out there. Apparently fairly prevalent, but I wonder how much of that has to do with Cisco's acquisition of Fluid Mesh.
Yeah, so the UWRB.
Yeah, the Curb radios, Cisco Ultra Reliable
Oh,
Wireless.
URWB. Oh, I messed that
Yeah.
up. Ultra reliable wireless backhaul. Yep.
With because Fluid Mesh was global, and then they had huge presence in ports and mass transit, specifically
Mhm.
rail. I mean, just ridiculous amounts of radios out there in those universes. So I'm wondering if that was a contributing factor to where Cisco lies on this list.
Yeah, I'd be interested to find out a good answer on that. And I think it's probably going to go up.
I agree.
Especially as because they just released that IW line, so they've got the control cabinet with dual radios, and then they've got their 9167 that's like you got all the IP you could want on a radio, can be outdoor, you know,
Yeah,
caps and all that stuff. And then with that now they've got that protocol that they're utilizing in the radio. So it's going to get out there, and I think it's going to be easy to kind of cohabit with other Cisco systems and probably eventually like manage easily from a controller. but definitely like a lot of those fluid mesh systems are going to have to be mapped over to so there's, I think right now there's going to be like an interim period of, can you use old devices, new devices? So I think that Cisco slice will probably increase pretty significantly. But they've got some cool things like they've got some good features that I think are going to really make it an attractive option in some of the stuff that we, especially like mobility stuff that we're doing. You're Before this call, we were talking about kind of like ports and rail and all that stuff, and
Right.
then it's going to
I don't
be.
know if they're taking, warehousing into this because Cisco infrastructure, wireless infrastructure for warehousing is massive.
Mhm.
The old saying, nobody ever got fired for buying Cisco, right?
Yeah. Well, the problem is, right, is it's either URWB or it's 802.11.
Right.
You can't do both out of the same radio.
So then after Cisco is Yokogawa, which is another, very popular control systems. And Yokogawa, if I remember correctly, is also another one of those founding members of or developers of ISA 100. Then we have Rockwell Automation, kind of the king of the PLCs, and as far as the Americas are concerned, whereas Siemens, I think, is much bigger over in Europe. Rockwell's kind of the Siemens of the US.
Mhm.
Um, but they have partnerships and ownerships and with a lot of different things. Prosoft is heavily associated with Rockwell, aka Alan Bradley. But remember, Rockwell, Alan Bradley was one of the founding members of the original IIoT wireless heart. So that was the very first industrial wireless protocol that was ever put out there was wireless heart, and Alan Bradley / Rockwell was like the founding base member of that. The last two on our top 10 for this are Advantech and Aris, two companies I know very little about, to be honest with you.
I know they start with an A.
Right.
Yeah.
So alphabetically, they would be up at the top, but as far as their production, they're still in the top 10 of worldwide. So to take this whole conversation a step further, we look at this report goes through the top industrial verticals for wireless as far as industry manufacturing, and the top three together combined are responsible for about 38% of industrial wireless device consumption. And the top three are chemical, in descending order: chemical, oil and gas, and my beloved pulp and paper. So worldwide, those three verticals are the consume the most industrial wireless devices, which to me that makes a lot of sense. Like we were talking earlier before the show, I was surprised that oil and gas wasn't number one, just because of the sheer land
Mhm.
mass that oil and gas tends to take up and volume of space that really puts wireless as a very spot on technology deployment for it, and that chemical was actually the first. But pulp and paper doesn't surprise me because a pulp and paper site is typically four different plants on one site between chemical processing, power generation, the actual paper creation, and wood handling. You have four different plants on any
Yeah.
given actual site.
Well, I wonder if maybe some of that, like the chemical, you have subsidiaries from there, right? Because like a gypsum plant is downstream from like an electricity plant, right? So what are I could name them all, right? But like what are the things that are downstream from oil and gas? And there's
Right.
there's chemical refinery at every, from all of these kind of like raw materials as kind of the parent. So it probably makes sense that like, extracting the product is one thing, but then like each level of refinement, there's a plant, there's a transportation, there's another plant to further refine it. And so I could see how maybe like chemical is above that.
So after our top three there, that again, almost 40% of all consumption of all these devices. Um, Next up, you have power generation. So again, I totally get that, and wastewater. And the thing is in most pulp and paper, you have power generation and you have wastewater.
Hmm.
So it's interesting how all these things are intertwined. Metallurgy and mining, throwback to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. That is what, number 6 on our list. And I guess that, I don't know, man, because they're really, the more I read about that and how much they're pushing wireless down into deeper mining and whatnot, it requires a lot of devices.
Yeah, and even like the overland stuff too, where it's like, okay, you've got the stuff that extracts the material from the earth, and then you've
Open
got the
pit.
trans
Yep.
yeah, and then like from the pit to like whatever staging area before it goes to the next process.
And then our final two runners up are for our food and beverage and then pharma and biotech.
Yeah.
And
Oh well,
I'm willing to bet in pharma and biotech it's more just generic 802.11 as opposed to any sort of specific industrial protocols, just because of clean spaces and whatnot.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, so
who
it's
knows?
probably
I
the
haven't done enough pharma biotech to really get
well,
involved.
aside from like the actual process, right, there's probably a lot of like temperature control sensors and stuff's got to be
Okay, I'll buy
in a
that.
certain range to be like shelf stable or something like that. So I could definitely see if at least from like an IoT standpoint, like you could have like vast arrays of that stuff.
And then after that is everybody else. So everybody else is not important. Only these are.
Yeah, I would be willing to be a remote taste tester for a beverage site. That would be, maybe
Depending on the beverage. Now, if it's a
a
brewery,
a beer plant or something. That might
a
be
brewery, a remote, I'm gonna look into that. I
that
don't know
could
if
be.
where you
Hey,
live is anything like Wilmington, but here in Wilmington, you can't swing a dead cat and not hit a new brewery, independent popping up. Not that you should be
yeah.
swinging dead cats anyway, but if you did,
Well, it'd probably be better to swing a dead cat than a live cat, right?
that's true.
Anyway, let's get back on track.
To wrap this up, the largest markets for industrial wireless devices coming in first place, America, North America, US, Mexico, Canada, by far the largest consumer of industrial wireless devices. I brought this to really kind of help illustrate a point that there is not enough of us out there specializing in industrial wireless applications. It's coming. It's already here. It's only going to expand and grow. Um, so if any of our OT people out there are interested in wireless, man, there's tons of resources out there to help get you started. CWNP is a great way to do so, especially with their IoT track. They don't necessarily get super deep into industrial specifically, but all of the various IoT protocols and non 802.11 that they cover, the concepts still apply to just about everything.
Mhm.
Um, and it's just a lot of great information. You know, uh, North America followed up by Europe, obviously, which makes perfect sense because of how much industrial automation is going on over in Europe. Then Asia Pacific, and not just like Asia, like every single country in the Asia Pac Rim areas. Then South America, and then followed up by the Middle East, as far as the largest markets are concerned.
Mhm.
So that's a lot to digest there. But again, I think it does express the growing nature of industrial wireless in general.
Well, definitely, man, you said Middle East and Africa. I would like to go see it, but we've got several projects in UAE. You obviously can't name them, but there's definitely like as they build attractions or they build things that for tourism purposes, um, they're deploying industrial stuff from in like an entertainment context at least. But I mean, you also have oil and gas there. I did, if you don't mind, I did want to circle back a minute to one
Sure.
of the things that you said about Rockwell being the kind of one of the was it Rockwell, right? The pioneer in like
With wireless heart, yeah.
with heart. And if anybody has any questions about that, I just wanted to point out that you had an excellent episode previous that I listened to it a few times and I got a lot out of it because we don't really touch wireless heart too much in our travels. Not saying that we won't, but I haven't seen it a bunch, so that was very informative for me. So
I
if you
believe
have
that was
questions, look it up.
I believe that was episode 4, and
Yeah,
that was all about wireless heart and ISA 100 specifically.
yeah, that was all killer, no filler, man. That was a good. That was a good episode.
Yeah, I I had to research a lot of the finite stuff on that one, but it's amazing when you look back at when those protocols were actually introduced. They were way ahead of their time and way ahead of their game.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks again for tuning in to episode 7, the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop. We're gonna keep cranking out the content. I'm hoping to do some giveaways here before too terribly long for all of our loyal listeners out there, both OT and wireless. Thank you again, Jeremy. Thanks for hanging out. You're the best money. You're the best color commentary man. Money can't buy because I don't have any. So.
Yeah, my price is free 33.
Oh, I like that free 33. Well, everybody, have a great day and stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we hope you join us on our next episode of the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop.